All right. So, we're getting ready for kitchen chat tonight. So let's wait just a few seconds for everyone to log on. Glad you guys joined us, and we're going to get started in just a minute on library and cellaring your wines. Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like dead air time while we're waiting for people to come on.
How do we know?
Say who you are.
How do we know? How do we know they've signed on?
How's it going there, Shlyn? Are we
We've
good?
got attendees coming in left, right, and center
Good.
right
Excellent.
now. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sandra Oldfield. I'm the president and CEO at Tinhorn Creek Vineyards, and I'm here tonight in our kitchen with my husband, so it's appropriate because typically he's the one who's in the kitchen most of the time, and that's Ken Oldfield.
Yep. I'm Ken Oldfield, and I'm not CEO
No.
of Tinhorn Creek Vineyards.
Not anymore, but he is chairman of the board, so he still sometimes is my boss, so there you go. We also have a couple people in the room tonight adding color commentary in the background. I'll get them to come out and say hi. We have Terry Meyerstone. Hi. There you go. And Shalane Sleegers, both of whom you guys know if you are part of our wine club, because they're the ones that organize it and try and keep all of you guys happy, which is an impossibility, but we try.
It's a happy club. Yeah, very happy club.
So the way these work is we do them every couple months. We pick a bit different topic, and we're always keen if you guys can send us topics because, we don't have an endless supply of ideas. We run for about an hour, actually just an hour. And if you have questions, don't wait. Just type them in. And when we get to a lull or so, that's when Terry and Shalane usually feed us some of the questions. And and then we'll just get started, I think. So, yeah. Yep. So we are talking about library and cellaring wines. I thought maybe I'd just give you a quick just overview on what we do from Tinhorn Creek's perspective for our library. I know you guys aren't as fortunate as, you don't have an entire cellar of tanks and tanks and barrels of wines. But when we started out back in 1994, we thought we were going to be wildly successful, which of course we are. And so we wanted to hold back a certain amount of our wines right from the very first year. And so every year we've held back a good amount of red and white cases, upwards of 10-ish cases of red every year of every wine we've made, and about 2 to 3 cases of white every year. And we've been pretty good about doing that ever since. And so we have the ability, like we just did recently in December, to go through our library and to taste all the vintages, which unfortunately you were not invited to. I don't know how you missed that.
Just fortunate.
I'm sorry. We tasted
tasting a bunch of older wines is not necessarily the best.
Really? It was awesome.
Some of them cork finished 20-year-old wines are not aging very well.
Yeah, no, actually it was pretty surprising. We'll get into that a little bit, what has fared well and what hasn't. But anything that had a screw top forward, we didn't taste. We went to the oldest screw top that we have. It was still very drinkable. And so we actually only went from around 2004. We basically tasted every single wine that we've made here. And our preconceived notions was that we were going to have some issues, especially with the whites. And it was surprisingly a good tasting. Like even going back like a Gewürztraminer, especially.
Bring me the best ones.
I will.
Yes.
I will. So we might get out of us tonight why we don't have a big cellar of our own downstairs, because in the early years, my stepson drank some of it. But we do tend to raid the Tinhorn Creek cellar a little bit. So yeah. So anyway, tonight we're going to be tasting some library wines, especially wines that you might be able to purchase in February when we do a library sale that's just for Crush Club members. So if you're not a Crush Club member, it's doesn't take a big onerous thing to join up. You can just call us up and join up, and then you'll have access to these wines. Usually once a year, we'll do these library sales. So I think that's what we're going to do tonight. So my first question for you was, did you ever think we were going to still be in business for 23 years after you started
Of course.
the winery? Really?
Of course. I knew where I was going to be. Was I sure about you?
Yeah, whatever. So we're going to first off pour some 2013 Pinot Gris. And the Pinot Gris, again, it's not normally a wine that I would recommend that you age, but if you it's not like you should get rid of them. And I will tell you on the whites, and in particular the Gewürztraminer, we were pretty shocked when we tasted some Gewürztraminers from the early 2000s, late 90s that they were definitely still worth drinking.
Yes.
And that was the one variety I actually thought, I know we're getting off Gris a little bit, but it was the one variety I thought would age the worst in the whites, and it actually aged the best.
They change. They're not.
Yeah, they're not as fruity.
Yeah.
They can get a little bit more dark colored, a little bit more golden.
Although not even doing that, they're still staying pretty
I
green.
didn't do that too much. And then, traditionally I would have thought the Chardonnays would have aged the best. And that's not what I found. I found, they had a good 5, 7, 8 year aging ability. But when we went back to the older vintages, they hadn't held up as well as the Pinot Gris and the Gewürztraminer had. So anyway, this is the 2013 right off the bat, because we're 10 minutes in. We should be able to drink wine by now.
We have 4 wines, 10 minutes. Yeah. We need time.
No kidding. So 2013 Pinot Gris is what we're tasting. So, this wine's about 3 years old. I tend to tell people the Pinot Gris ages well for a couple of years. And then after that, you don't necessarily need to age it. But this wine can easily go 3 or 4 more. It's got a lot of acidity.
Good acidity, starting to a little bit of amber in color, but the flavors are there. The acidity is there. Yeah. So actually, this was the wine that we, when we were interviewing for Andrew Windsor to join us as winemaker, it was this vintage that he tasted before he joined us, and he was pretty happy with this vintage and very happy with the Pinot Gris. And so when we were discussing whether or not, when he became the winemaker, he would change the styles a little bit. When he tasted this Gris, he said, no, this is kind of what we should be aiming for. And so even though I was the winemaker when this wine was made, Andrew Windsor has kind of carried on with a similar style to this one since he's taken over. And I think that's great because the wine should age really well. Yeah, subtle changes and steady improvements on it. Yeah.
So for example, now he's not adding yeast. He's doing natural ferments. These ones were not. But as most winemakers recognize, the basic wine that you have in your glass is mostly due to where you get your grapes from and the type of vintage that you have, not quite as much as the influence that you have in the cellar, although most winemakers like me always want to feel it's the influence that you have in the cellar to be, when push comes to shove, really. Most of these wines are definitely directed where they're going to head based on the place that we're getting the grapes from and the vintage year that we're having. Yeah, the weather. Yeah. So when we release this one, it's going to be 1849. The sale's going to be in the first week of Feb. So we'll tell you a little bit about more of that later. But just the one white that we are
So when
that
you say
we're
when we
releasing.
release, have we mentioned that these are library
Yeah.
wines that are available to our
Yeah,
club
so
members?
I thought I had, but
I
fair
don't
enough
remember.
if I hadn't. So when we re-release these, they're going to be
Re-release these
re-released
wines.
as library wines to our club members.
Right.
So yeah.
Don't know. Maybe I was not paying attention.
Yeah, it's all good. Do you have any questions?
I actually have a question myself. So do you think that because like the BC wine market is fairly new, like we're a young industry, so it's kind of interesting as to seeing how long we can actually cellar for, but do you think a lot of it has to do with our climate as to why the Gewürztraminers are still tasting fairly good? And like, what do you think are contributions that help?
I mean, we certainly in general, and especially in the 90s and early 2000s, I mean, we got and we get fairly good acidity, and acidity is one of the three things that help age a wine. The other two would be alcohol and tannins. So again, that's typically why you're aging your reds and not aging your whites. But I don't know if BC is better equipped than other areas, but I do know that as wines come in from hotter climates, they come in with lower acidity, and lower acidity doesn't always bode well for aging long periods of time. So, yeah.
But that does take us back, 15 years ago when we were being asked, how long will this wine aged? And we had 5 years in the business, and we were telling people,
don't know.
Come back in 10 years and we'll tell you how well that one aged.
Right.
And then we'll be able to tell you maybe with more confidence how well the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how other wineries do it, but I've always thought it to be a little bit of a sham when some wineries who are brand new in the valley or have only been around for 2 or 3 years are telling their customers that this wine will age well for 10 or 15 years. There's no way that you can say that until you've been through those 10 or 15 years and you're able to look back on your library and go, yes, no, actually, not so much, it's all just conjecture. And you can't judge any BC wines using like a French standard or a California standard for how well things age. You really have to have put those years in and then look back on your own wine. So, and that's why I said, like, I was surprised by some of our whites have lasted longer than I thought they would. I've just poured the Pinot Noir, which we're going to talk about here. It's the 2011 Pinot Noir.
2011.
Right,
yeah. 2011.
Yeah. And the 2011 Pinot Noir, I mean, for us, we think this wine gets, better and better as it gets more years on it. This wine, is going to sell for just under $30, $29.99. And you're buying a 6-year aged Pinot Noir, which again, pretty unheard of in BC to find available for sale, 5.5, 6-year aged Pinot Noir. For us, this wine is, I think one of the reasons why we held it back years ago is because we recognize that Pinot Noir in the South Okanagan really needs those extra bottle age time.
After we had some time.
Yeah, that's right.
At 10 years, we tasted back and we found that our Pinot Noirs had a sweet spot around that 5-year time frame. And
and we were also finding that, we would sell our Pinot Noirs younger, like after 2 or 3 years. And after the 3rd year, people were just starting to say, whoa, that's really starting to come into its own now. It's like, well, it's sold out. So, we made a conscious effort a few years back to hold back our Pinot Noir. We held back even longer yet. But yeah, this the re-release, and it's one of my favorite wines right now at our house because it's a perfect winter wine. Yeah, no. It's just a perfect winter wine. It's like you're not out there grilling and barbecuing foods all winter long. Typically, the Pinot Noir, I think, goes with lots of winter and spring dishes. Mm-hmm. And, it's a year-round kind of wine. So, I mean, I haven't tasted it yet, but it looks great.
I'm all done mine. So.
Yeah. And that, in a nutshell, is what happens in our house.
So Bourguignon is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we had a question come through. So how do you know your wine is off? Is there different like flavor characteristics you're looking for in a white versus a red? Is there different things to look for?
Well, let's face it. I mean, first of all, if you try it and you like it and somebody else says it's off, who cares? Like, I mean, ultimately, if something's off or not depends on your own palate. So right. I'll state that first. I mean, I know people that have a very low, I mean, they can't detect even cork problems with wines. And so for them, a wine might be enjoyable and the person next to them might be more susceptible to cork problems and they won't go near it. So, first of all, what is off? But, sometimes when a wine has started to turn or age improperly, you're going to get more of a vinegar taste in there. It can start turning what they call volatile acidity or VA. So a little bit more sour. It can be tired, meaning
soy sauce.
Yeah, it can start tasting like medicinal or soy sauce. Of course, bad corks cause their own issue. And then if more oxygen gets in the bottle, again, typically just over time, the wine can start kind of browning. It can not taste very fruity anymore. And kind of when a wine's kind of gone off the edge and it's not really worth drinking anymore is, there's no redeeming fruit qualities in that wine anymore. It's just tastes like the oak barrel it was in or alcohol. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean.
Off wines are definitely off. You don't like them.
A defect
they
or
taste
something. Yeah.
Not pleasant. But a wine that's aged out may still taste okay, but it's not tasting as good as it did before or not tasting as good as when it hit its peak. The proper balance of tannins, fruit, acidity, alcohol.
This wine is tasting so smooth right now.
This one is tasting.
Really tasting.
I mean, the
smooth.
color is brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, we moved to the Stelvin screw top closure back in 2004 for all of our wines. We first did it in 2003. And, it's just unbelievable what it does for aging. And so these wines, although they've gotten softer, they do age. It's not like it just locks in the flavors of at bottling time. They absolutely age over time, but they just age so much more gracefully that the fruit is popping out of this wine like it was just bottled, and it's 6 years old.
We got a question from Jeff. He has a 2010 Oldfield Series Pinot Noir, so he wants to know, should he age it a little longer or should he be drinking it soon?
Well, I like a sweet spot for us around 7 years, so in the next year or two, I would probably open it. But it's not like it's going to be bad if you wait 3 more years. It's still going to be good. And, this 2011 that we're tasting right now is an unseasonably cold year for us, which was quite good for Pinot Noir. As you start going into some of our later vintages of Noir, they're going to be a little bit rounder and more luscious at release time, but they may not bode as well for aging longer. And this particular vintage, along with the 09 and the 2010, which were all progressively cooler years, so 9 was cool, 10 got a little cooler, 11 got quite cold. All 3 of those years in there, I would say, will age really well. So your 2010 in the middle, would be great to open now, or you can wait a year or two.
If you have a few bottles, try one.
If you have more than a bottle,
try
I'd open one now.
In a year or now,
Yeah.
and then make a note. Say
if there's any different characteristics about BC wines and how they age and cellar versus, say, established area like France.
Yeah, I can't compare it to France so much, but we definitely, if you were to compare it to, say, a New World area like California or somewhere in South America, I find that for reds in particular, we don't have beastly tannins that need to be tamed. We're not a super hot climate. And so we're not getting these really unmanageable, really astringent reds when they're first bottled. So in that sense, our wines are a little bit more approachable, probably right from the get-go, compared to some other really, like I said, ones that are kind of beastly or you got to tame them. So you don't necessarily have to age our wines necessarily as long, but it's just, to me, so interesting how if you are able to age BC wines longer, how smooth they get and how they complement our foods here so well, because we have relatively delicate flavors in BC, fresh produce, seafood, all the rest, and I find that the wines don't, they match quite nice. They don't overpower. Yeah.
Carol wants to know, is there a wine that you should not age? Something that you should just drink?
Any wine. Buy them, drink them,
Well,
buy more.
The wine that you should not age would be the free wine that your friend just brought you over that night. I would definitely open that one up right away.
Yeah.
Free wines are the best wines.
Yeah. If it's in a box.
Let's see. I mean, anything can be aged. I mean, but the answer is what's the purpose? If you have a single bottle, I wouldn't age it, because to be honest with you, you end up with what I call single bottle syndrome, which is like the special bottle of wine somebody brought you, but you only have one of them and you never want to open it. And so it just sits there and sits there. It probably would have been better had you drank it sooner.
Yeah.
But if you have like 3 bottles, 4 bottles, a half a case, or even a case of wine, that's the time where, you can drink some now, drink some in a year, drink some a year after that, and just kind of see how the wine's progressing. And you'd be surprised. You don't really have to take notes on this. You'll just say like, wow, this is really tasting great. And
you'll remember it.
You will.
But yeah, if you've only got one,
I
think are having
that.
dinner tonight or saving it for some time, you're better off to have it now. And
that's what I think.
Buy more.
We also had one question from Greg Keeley. He has the Merlot Vertical starting from around 2001.
Right.
Nice.
So he wants to know, how are the oldest tasting shitties? What would you say to him?
So, Greg, we went back and tasted all the way back to 94, which was the first year we made Merlot. So I'm not sure if you have the Oldfield series or the Varietal series, but let's say that you have the Varietal series. Those wines, they're certainly tired and old as you would get into, say, 98 and beyond. But that being said, they weren't so tired that we threw them away, because we were actually going through our library, getting with the idea of culling it a bit, getting rid of bottles that had been over the hill. And there wasn't one red wine in those early years that we thought was over the hill, not worth keeping, at least to show people. In the 2001, if you're starting with 2001, I will tell you that if you go back to our wines that are red in particular, but also white, 2000 and 2001 in particular, we had a huge cork problem. It's part of what led us to move to Stelvin. And when we went back through our 2001 Merlots, Cab Francs, Pinot Noirs, Oldfield Merlot that was in a cork. We, at one point, if you can believe this, we had to open up 6 bottles of one of those to get one that wasn't corked. It was that bad. So we went through, we didn't know it at the time when we were bottling, but we went through a bad supply of corks in that 2000-2001 year. And it was pretty depressing because, we have been storing our wine at optimal temperatures. There was, no reason why they should have been off. And we were throwing those ones away. And yet 99, 98, 97, we were hanging. So I will let you know that when somebody tells me they have a 2001 anything, the first thing I tell them is, don't be surprised if it's off, right? By the time we started getting into 03 and 04 with corks, they were better and fine. And then again, 04, 05, we were into the screw top with everything, and we don't have an issue. Yeah.
You just referenced temperature. You said you've been keeping everything at the right temperature, so it must be cork. And we did have another question just about temperatures in their cellar. So Bill wrote in, and he's got a basement cellar with a really cool, dark location on an outside concrete wall. So his temperature can vary from about 12 in the winter to 18, even 20 in the summer. But he said kind of gradual temperature changes.
Right.
So we do have a poll.
Yeah, let's do the poll
Why
first.
don't we do the poll, and
Yeah.
then maybe you could just address a little bit about temperature?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're going to put a poll up on the screen and you guys vote. I'll have Chelan read the question out loud.
All right. Your cellar should be kept at what temperature? 21 degrees Celsius, 13 degrees Celsius, 7 degrees in the summer, and 16 in the winter, or doesn't matter? And so far right now, 13 degrees Celsius is like 100% winning. Nobody's.
Yeah, who came up with this? Because this doesn't even have the right answer in there.
Then I guess it doesn't
Well, in
matter.
that case, it's Chelan.
I know, right?
I'm like, where's the right answer? You just gave like 4 answers, but you
this
didn't
is
have the right answer
It's
in
a
there.
learning moment.
Fair enough.
Actually, that's interesting because this was a Google search.
Yeah.
With what was
Really?
given as the right answer.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
fair enough.
interesting.
Fair enough.
Interesting.
So has
My
everybody voted
opinion-
yet?
my
We'll
opinion.
let everyone
Yeah.
vote first.
Has everybody voted?
Let's see. Let's give it a few more seconds.
We do this every time.
I know we do, right? And then we're just like, let's do dead air. That'll be fun. Okay, we're ending it.
Okay, so let's hear your.
Anyway, my opinion is 16, maybe a little bit cooler, and as steady as you can get.
Which is where you were thinking 13 was the right answer, correct?
13, I would think, is a little cool, but
Yeah,
it
so
doesn't. Steady at 13 is as good as steady at 16, in my opinion.
so whose question was it about was it Greg, you said?
No, Bill. Guessed who
okay.
wrote in. Yeah, about
So-
his cellar.
So
and then the variability.
yeah, the variability is not as great, Bill. I mean, the fact that it's cooler in the winter and hotter in the summer, but the fact that you say that it reaches there in a kind of a slow
Progression.
yeah, that makes it probably better. And then it'll probably go back down to cold in a pretty slow progression as well. I mean, I think that's as good as you can get. And I mean, if you have a place to store your wine, a lot of people don't have that at all. So first of all, you do have something that's protected with concrete. It's probably well insulated. So yeah, your temperature changes aren't so rapid. Ideally, you'd want to try and keep the temperature the same, but that's not, that's only optimal. And so, I would say what you're doing is fine. And if you haven't seen any big problems with wines aging fast or corks popping or pushing out or anything like that, because really that's the issue, is if your cellar gets really warm all of a sudden, the corks can start pushing out and you can have all kinds of issues with the wine's longevity. So,
Yes. So that being said, our personal cellar is in the cellar.
Yeah.
In the
similar.
southwest corner of the building, but banked up, underground. And it does swing from about 12 to 16.
If we're lucky, it's 12. I bet right now it's colder than 12.
No, it's not.
Okay.
However, as Sandra will attest, she mentioned this, that one winter when she was concerned that it was getting too cold, she threw a space heater in.
I don't think that was me. I'm pretty sure that was you.
No, that was not. And pushed some corks on some wines. So
I'm sure that wasn't
got a
me.
little too. No, I think it was my son.
It was probably me.
No, you're someone who
me.
drank them all
Well,
before.
Anyway, so mistakes can happen in the cellar. But yeah,
For me, the
our own
ideal
pump,
is 16.
the white that's ready to go.
That was the other question that just came in. Is there any difference between red and white, or just
No, it's the same.
Okay.
It's the same. But the important part of all this is don't worry so much about the temperature. Just try and find something that's the temperature fluctuations are kept to a minimal.
Yeah.
Try and keep it out of direct sunlight. if you can. That's important. I love all these wine cellars I see where, all the bottles are hanging in the kitchens and on the back walls, and it looks really sexy and stuff. But, you should be drinking those wines right away, which is fine because, again, most people do drink wines right away. They don't age them. But if you do want to age them and you're in like an apartment and you can't find a cool spot, put them under your bed, put them somewhere where, it's as cool as it gets. And, don't worry so much if it's 21, 21 consistently summer and winter is better probably than the fluctuating ones that go up and down. Yeah.
Elizabeth asked about vibration. She'd heard vibration.
I think it is probably bad for wines, although, I don't have much firsthand experience with that. We live on a hill. Even our warehouse where our wines are stored doesn't get vibration. So I don't have a lot of personal experience with that. But
no earthquakes.
I've heard the same thing that so on top of your dryer.
Yeah,
probably not a good,
but that's also mainly because of the
spot.
heat. Right? So I have seen people that keep it on top of their dryer, and I'm thinking, or your refrigerator. And either way, it's not a good idea because of the heat.
Yeah.
But it's less, I would think, the vibration than the heat. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the other thing is, if you're able to keep it around 16 or so, what's really nice about that temperature is if you pull a white out of your cellar at 16. All you have to do is a half hour before you're going to drink it. You can either drink it right then or put it in the fridge for a half hour and it's ready to go. With the reds, you just have to usually leave it out for about a half an hour in room temp or maybe an hour and it's ready to go. And so there's not a lot of fuss and mess to deal with once you pull it out of your cellar, having to get it chilled or heated or whatever. Yeah. So I do find sometimes it's harder for us to keep, I feel like in the winter right now, when we're going down there, it's probably about 12, like you say, about 12 Celsius or so.
A little warmer.
And it's pretty chilly when I'm pulling the reds out.
Yeah.
And so, I've got to have them sitting out here for a good hour and a half till they're warm enough. And whereas if it was at 16, that would be a lot faster drinking, basically. Yeah.
This is probably a personal question, but how do you organize your cellar? Do you go by variety?
That's really a bad question in this house. Can we skip that question? Because it's like when you're married and he loads the dishwasher one way, I load the dishwasher one way, and then he changes it. It's the same way with the cellar. Like, so why don't you say how the right way is, and then I'll tell you how I do it. What's that?
I'll tell you how I do it. Our personal cellar is about 2/3 Tinhorn Creek wine and about 1/3 other. That other third would be mostly BC wines, but around the world.
Yeah.
So one whole wall is
the other.
No, one whole wall. The big wall is Tinhorn Creek wine.
Okay.
And as we use the wine,
we are married, by the way.
I condense it down so that the older vintages of a certain variety are there and they just get condensed back. And then the newer varieties go on. Yeah. And so when I am asked, can you find a 2010 Syrah?
I never asked.
I can find a 2010 Syrah or a 2001 Syrah. So organization, it takes quiet time. It takes alone time. And then there's the other side, which has no organization.
Yeah.
It's find a hole and fill it.
Yeah.
Then,
sort of.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how an engineer would organize a wine cellar. And I do believe that, if you're going to, have case stacks somewhere, you want those to be more at the back, the newest stuff, right? So then it just forces you not to grab that when you first go into, to grab that bottle that you want for that night. You're not going to be grabbing the newest stuff.
That's the third wall.
Yeah. So whatever. So that like force ages it. And I will tell you, I've heard some really good stories recently on some people. I can't remember who was telling me this recently, but they actually get wooden boxes and they put in a mixture of different wines from the same vintage into a wooden crate, and they
Nail it shut.
They nail it shut, and they just put it away.
No, they handwrite a date on it.
Yeah,
open
so it might say like 2016 on it, and then but when they nail it shut, it means that it's not going to be the first thing you grab. And a few years later, when you're ready to open your 2016s, there's a mixture in there of different wineries' wines. Anyway, I thought that was also a little over the top.
That was an Australian
cool.
winemaker.
Yeah, that was still pretty cool. So, but from my perspective, no, it's a little more zen, see a hole, fill it, that kind of thing.
Mine is a bit by variety, one row that says reserve age.
We have variety.
And then 2 shelves that my children can see if they go in, so that, if they go in and grab, it's the eye level.
So the way we've worked that here is we have this cellar downstairs, and who wants to go downstairs every time you want a bottle of wine? So we do have a small wine fridge, a very small one, just holds 24 bottles that we put in our kitchen when we built it. And we will go downstairs and pull a bunch of wines for it when it goes low, and we'll stock them up here. And so those are the quick drink, anything in there you can pull.
The weekend.
Yeah, that way Ken's not going down there and, because there has been the odd time where I've come home and he's halfway through a bottle of like Lafite.
Nope.
And I'm like, really?
Nope.
You opened up the Lafite while I wasn't here?
Nope. This is why it's organized, so I know how many we have left of anything.
I used to hang things on the bottleneck saying like, this is okay for you to open.
No,
but
it was the other way around. If it had a white tag, it was a don't touch.
Yeah, fair enough. Same idea. But yeah, we are married, actually. It's so funny that you guys would think that we're not. I can hear you out there saying, I don't think these people are married. Our 2010 Merlot Oldfield series is the third wine we're having tonight. We've been making Oldfield series Merlot since 2001. This is the 2010. And, again, similar to that Pinot Noir that we just had from 2011, this wine ages well. And you would think that because it's a Merlot, it has a little bit more tannin, it would age it even longer. In general, I'd say that's true. But again, going back through our library, we didn't see a huge difference in aging less. Let's put it that way. So just because the Pinot Noir has less tannins, it was still aging just as long as the Merlots and the Cab Francs were. So these Merlots range anywhere from 3 or 4% Cab Franc in them to 14% Cab Franc. They tend to always have 1 or 2% Syrah in them. This particular one, I have to throw on my glasses real quick. It's 93% Merlot and 6% Cab Franc and just a 1% Syrah. And again, from a kind of a cool year, but I don't think any, I would order up in a second because those nondescript, middle of the road, not too hot, not too cold years for me are my favorites. And this in 09 would be wine, vintage years that weren't too hot or too cold. So one of my favorite vintages. It's tasting really good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You can tell because there's this
So
little
it's
silence.
Quiet.
It's so funny because, again, when we went through our library and we did this tasting with Jan, our sales and marketing manager, myself, and Andrew Windsor, our winemaker, we were down in I know it sounds rough, but we'd start at like 8 in, and we did like 3 days in a row from 8 till 12. And we were just solid taste spit the whole morning. And, I think, for me, that was just really pleasant. And there was no wine that we tasted there that was in screw top. So again, we were tasting for 3 days straight, 4 hours a day, but we weren't tasting anything from about 2006 newer. So there's a whole 10 years of vintages that we never even tasted. We were basically 10 years and older. Yeah, which was kind of neat. Because, I mean, we really do feel that, as soon as we see that it's an Estelle with a screw cap, we're like, it's good, it's fine. Move on to the older ones. Yeah. Yeah.
We have one question in. What do you think about apps for tracking aging for wines?
Yeah, I thought I'd get that question tonight. We have lots of people that use them. Andrew Moon, our vineyard manager, uses Vivino. He loves it, and if I was into that more, I would use them. I haven't done a review of all of them. I know Vivino is one in particular that's kind of I'm not giving them a plug, but it's kind of neat where you can go on there and see other people who drank that wine and the scores, the collective scores it's gotten. You, of course, can open up the wine and leave your own score. And, for me, wines like if you don't know where to start, it's a good place to start. Mm-hmm. The other good place to start, because I thought I might get this question right, is, if it's a BC winery, you should be able to pick up the phone and call them. And, hopefully they'll be honest with you, like, hey, we haven't tasted that for 3 or 4 years. I don't really know. But if they have tasted it, they're pretty good usually with telling you whether or not you should be opening it now or not. I mean, I've had some people who own vertical collections of Merlots and Cab Francs who've, before they're going to open them up for a group of people, they've called me up, emailed me. I've sent them a technical sheet on every single one of those wines, so they have them before the tasting. I've given my thoughts on each vintage, my ideas of the vintages, so it kind of adds to their tasting. And we're always open to do stuff like that if you're going to be tasting 2 or 3 wines in a row on different vintage years. I mean, you're in BC for the most part, or Alberta. Most of you guys are, even if you're in Canada. I mean, we should be completely accessible wineries because we're not wildly huge wineries, and there's no reason for us to act corporately and, just go to the website. The answer is pick up the phone and call the winery, I think. Yeah. But that's just me. Of course, I
don't do apps, so
no.
I don't know.
Yeah, I just know the people who do them. They're good.
Yeah, Vivino gets a lot of good comments because the people who put their own reviews on get qualified against others, calibrated against others. So you're not going to get crazy reviews just because somebody's got an UGG on. Yeah.
But the flip side happens too. Like the really neat thing is with our wine club, because we've had a wine club for so long, and prior to that we had this, these Merlots were on futures. So we did that for many years. We have a lot of people who buy Tinhorn Creek by the case when they buy it. And they do that because they're used to aging the wines. And so just as frequently as we give feedback on how our wines are aging, just as frequently you guys are sending us emails and tweets and postings on Facebook on how, the wine you just opened up from Tinhorn Creek, how it tasted the night before, good or bad. Mm-hmm. And, it's not like, I'd love to say that we're, so organized that we put all these things in a database. We don't, but, it's stored. Like we share it with other people when we get it, but it also, in my head, I kind of file it in there. And it'll be surprising when somebody will tell me, hey, I just had your 2005 Merlot. It's tasting amazing. And literally 2 weeks later, I'll get somebody out in Calgary that says, hey, I have a 2005 Merlot. And I can immediately tell them, I haven't had it for about a year, but I just talked with somebody who had it. And so you guys feeding back information, share it as well. Yeah.
We have a question from Roger. He has sort of from 2012 onward Cab Franc. How's that aging?
Yeah, so actually,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
we're actually the last wine we're having tonight is our. But you probably have our varietal Cab Franc. This is our Old Field Series Cab Franc. So, Roger, we've made Cab Franc since 1997. When we did the library tasting, we didn't taste anything that was newer than 2005. And I can tell you the Cab Franc's age, I think, the best of our red wines. If I had to pick one variety that's aging the best, easy peasy. Like you could go a lot longer. But again, with me, a great rule of thumb is that's my dog, by the way, if you're hearing noise. A great rule of thumb is around 7 years plus or minus a year is that allows that wine to soften up a bit. It's not losing its fruit yet. I use that 7-year rule at Tin Hern quite often when I haven't had the wine for a while. So 2012, you're getting in there. If you want to hang on to it for a year or two more, great. But I'm sure it's tasting better now than it did when it was first released. So every year it gets a little bit better, but then, aging is kind of like a curve. It gets better and better and better for a while, and then it holds for a certain amount of time, and you just don't know how long that sweet spot is. Mm-hmm. And then it starts losing fruit and losing, its impact. And sometimes that hold time can go for or two. It kind of peaked and then it crashed. So, but again, I find that the Stelvin has helped expand that curve. It just stretches it out. And so this wine, I don't know if you guys are all familiar, but in 2010, we started making the Old Field Series Cab Franc. And then in 2011, because it was a cold year, we didn't make an Old Field Series Cab Franc. And so we are releasing a few of the 2012, which was the next vintage that we made it in. And this Cab Franc is all Cab Franc. It's not blended with anything else. It was from the ripest part of our vineyard that year. Saw all French oak. It was a pretty great vintage year for us. I think we've had better since. Certainly since Andrew Windsor's come, we've had some pretty hot years that have done well for Cab Franc. But this, I think, was a pretty nice year. And there was kind of a pent-up demand for this wine when we released it originally because we had taken a whole year off not producing.
Yeah, we skipped the year.
Yeah, not producing an Old Field Cab Franc. So, yeah. It's really spicy still. You still get the pepperiness. There's no green on it at all. It's got really fresh fruit. It's raspberry and still got that little bit earthiness. That's kind of indicative of Cab Franc, and but definitely smoother than when it first came out. Yep. Yeah.
We did have a question in from Steve. What is the difference between the Old Field Series and the varietal?
Yeah, so the Old Field
$20.
Yeah. And this is why I bring my husband.
This is why I'm not allowed out.
That's why it's the kitchen chat and not the out in public chat. Yeah, $20. No.
Not even that.
Our Old Field Series wines are our reserve wines. And so they tend to be wines that we designate right after ferment time. We look at the blocks in our vineyard that produce what we feel is the grape that not only had the highest amount of fruit quality, but also the highest amount of tannin. And those two things, again, come from more extracted grapes, and those wines tend to age longer than the ones that would have lower fruitiness or lower tannin. And so, when we decide to make an Old Field Series wine, the vintage has to kind of dictate that it was that kind of vintage to make it. Now, on a wine like Noir and Merlot, every year those ripen here. They're early ripening reds. It's not really an issue. But on the Cab Franc, if you get a cold year, it's not necessarily
So I was going to
ideal.
say, was that question specific to Cab Franc or in general? between.
Well, Steve just said, what's the difference between the two series? So
Yeah. I mean, so for
Yeah.
me, it's definitely, it comes from the best block that year in the vineyard. It can be a blend of blocks, but typically it comes from one or two blocks. It's separated out, uses a different oak program, a lot more complex oak mixture of different barrels from different producers in France. And then it's aged for a lot longer in oak. So instead of just a year, now Andrew Windsor's tending to stretch that to 22, 23 months in oak. But then nice enough at the end of that, we're still giving it almost a year in bottle before release. Right. And so these wines tend to see three plus years aging before we release them. Whereas our varietal wines, they would tend to just be 2 years aged at the winery.
Yeah, initially 75%, 80% of what we do was the 6 varietals, 100% of each.
Yep.
And Which we still do.
Yep.
And that's the workhorse that keeps the lights on, pays the bills. And then the Oldfield series was cutting the winemaker some slack and saying, with the freedom to do what you want to do, what would you do?
But we didn't start making Oldfield series wines till we felt we got to know our vineyards better,
right.
which was 2001 to 2004. So
the program.
Yeah. So we had been in business for almost 10 years before we started making reserve wines. Yeah. So again, the 4 wines we had tonight, the 2013 Pinot Gris, we're going to be selling for $18.49. The 2011 Pinot Noir, my personal favorite. I don't know about you, but it's still the one that I'm going back to, is $29.99. And then we have the Oldfield Merlot, which was from 2010 at $28.99. And then this last one, the Oldfield Cab Franc, which we're selling for $32.99. So those will be going on sale for Crush Club members only between February 2nd through 7th. And
do we have a limit?
We may have to limit. We'll have to see as the sale comes in.
The sale goes through.
But
it's 5 days. So
yeah.
There's very small quantities of each of those.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's only going to club members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, again, I think the Pinot Gris is interesting because it's, you may not open a Pinot Gris, but, for me personally, I find that the Pinot Noir is the one that you would get the most mileage out of buying a case or so, because it's the one that surprises most people that it ages as well as it does.
Yep.
And, you will be surprised with a wine like that if you were to, even though it's a 2011 right now, you can hang on to it for 5 or 6 more years and you're still going to be happy with it. So, yeah, pretty neat.
Yep.
We have another poll.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Right before the end?
Do we have time?
Okay, go ahead.
How many bottles do we have?
Oh, yeah, in our Tinhorn Creek. How many bottles of wine do we have in our Tinhorn Creek library?
So in the library, so we can choose between 15,000, 5,000, 8,000, or 2,000. So what do we think it is? Well, we're at a 50-50 split right now between 15,000 and 5,000. 5,000 is now edging out. I feel like I'm in a
horse race.
Yeah, I'm just like,
Are you good?
And we've got 20. Nobody's saying 2,000. I haven't been working here long enough to get through that library. Just saying.
Yeah.
It's not a lending library.
Yeah, it's not a
I
lending
know.
library.
What? Is it filed by Dewey Decimal or?
All right. So it's really tight actually. There's only 17% for 15,000, 38 for 5,000, and 50% for 8,000. So give or take the top 3. There's nobody saying it's 2,000. So
Okay, so the answer is 15,000. Believe it or not. I know, it's crazy. We're actually at 14,000, almost 800 right now. And going into this next bottling period, it'll hit about 15,000. And so, we're fortunate. We actually use that library for one thing on a yearly basis that some of you who've come out here have seen, and that's Miradoro has these wines in the restaurant year round. And so they don't have every single vintage of every single variety, but all the Oldfield series, they have all of them. And, there's a few like Cab Francs where we weren't making an Oldfield series. They have those.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly have access to any of the other ones. But they have been going through library wines all summer long when people come.
Yep.
We actually feel that eating a dinner or lunch at Miradoro is the perfect place to have the library wines because, library wines are unique. They should be opened by somebody who knows how to treat a library wine, especially if you're opening one that's 20 years old or 15. Manny, of course, his staff down at the restaurant knows, exactly how to serve it, how to let the sediment settle and all the rest. Again, with you at home, don't worry about it so much, but it's kind of nice when, if you're able to treat yourself to a library wine when you come here. And then I think what we're going to be doing is when we start going out and doing a few more Crush Club events this year, next tastings that I've been doing, we're going to be using library wines to show people. So we are going to be going in to this 15,000 bottle library in the next few years and bringing them out. Not for Chelan though. And, but again, like I'll tell you, like it's still pretty tricky. Like we could have, let's say 3 cases left of a 1998 Cab Franc, one of my favorite wines we ever made. And we and pull 6 bottles for dinner, that means we got to bring out 12 just in case any are corked. Right.
Right.
And again, if I'm ever going to have a 2000 or 2001, the answer is I probably won't. Mm-hmm. We probably won't be bringing those out because I don't want to have to go through a bunch of corks to find one that's acceptable. So we kind of know that ahead of time. But other than those exceptions, I think it's something we want to share with you guys at some dinners in the future.
Like lunch on Friday in Calgary.
So are we bringing some out to that?
Yeah, I think we'll bring the Oldfield Series Merlot because the the current vintage is being poured with the main course.
Okay.
So we're going to give a side-by-side.
Okay, so we're doing a lunch in Calgary where we're going to bring one out this Friday. I'm doing a dinner in Calgary at the Petroleum Club, and we're doing a vertical of our Cab Franc at that, which is kind of neat. So again, like to be able to still have these wines, I mean, it's not that we like hanging on to them because believe me, they're overrunning our warehouse. So we do have to get a handle on them. But, we also don't want to pour them all out so that they're down to 0. We'll always be keeping probably 6 bottles of everything we make here just for historical purposes. But yeah. So anyway, if you guys,
we're adding at about 1,000 to 1,500 bottles a year,
which means we have to drink about that many.
No, into the cellar or to the library, and we're taking out less than that. So it is a growing library because we will keep.
But I'm thinking we should drink like
everything.
1,000 bottles a year, and then we'll be keeping up with it. Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
And
cheers from the Crush Club corner.
And Sandra's in my personal library, or personal cellar, is about 1,000 bottles. So
is it?
It's about there.
He knows that because he organizes it better than
obviously.
I do. So, so if there were questions that you guys didn't get answered, just email me at sandra@tinhorn.com. I'm away tomorrow, but I'm in the rest of the week. And can answer those for you outside of this. And the next time we're doing a kitchen chat is in 2 months on March 13th. That's going to be in this place again. It's always an odd one because we have Chef Jeff with us and he's so tall. So it's been so hard to get him to be like shorter and me taller for those. But anyway, we're going to talk about lots of things. I'd like to talk about some of the things he's thinking of for the new menu this year, some of the foraging things he's planning on doing. And we'll certainly talk about food and wine pairing, but that'll be March 13th. That'll be the next one. And then, like I said, after that, if you guys have topics that you really want covered, just send them to us at Tinhorn and they'll go to Terry or Chelan and we'll organize that. Yeah.
Yes.
So good.
All right, I think we're going to sign off. So we're just going to end.
Well, thanks, guys.
Bye.